computer at NASA. Evelyn Granville, who wrote programs at IBM that helped analyze satellite orbits. Jerry Lawson, who led the team that built the video game cartridge. If any of those out there old enough to remember this? I certainly am. Yes. He's called the father of modern gaming. Katherine Johnson. Yes. What a name, what a person. 35 years at NASA. She worked on Apollo, the space shuttle, plans for mission to Mars. So the work that she did, we're going to continue seeing the benefits going well into the future. Mark Dean. He holds 3 of 9 patents behind IBM's release of the PC in 1981. Melba Mouton, Chief of Research Programs at NASA in the 60s. Roy Clay Sr., founding member of the computing division at Hewlett-Packard, and many, 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 many more contributions that we've never heard of, okay, but that happened and are going to have long-lasting, profound effect. So that's our past. Let's take a look at where we're at right now. Today, Black Americans are 13.4% of the US population, and in 2016 constituted 8.6% of graduates with bachelor's degrees in computer and information science. This number, by the way, has significantly decreased since then. In the US, of 46.8 million Black Americans, 215,600 are software developers. Women. Women make up almost half of the workforce, but make up only 34% of employees at the largest tech companies. Black women engineers. It was hard to even get statistics around this. Fortune 500 companies. In 2020, in terms of leadership at Fortune 500 companies, men held 463 CEO positions, women held 37, Black men held 3, and at the time of that reporting, Black women held none. A 2018 McKinsey study found that there were more CEOs named David than there were women CEOs. Okay, current state, Africa. Africa has a reported 716,000 software developers, half of them in 5 key markets: Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Kenya, Morocco. There's been a 3.8% increase since 2020. What about the future? Where are we headed? With such a rich past and a shaky present, where will the future take us? As of 2020, there are 7.8 billion Black people in the world. In Africa, the internet economy is expected to reach $180 billion. As of 2020, there were 7.8 Black people in the world, but by 2045, Black and brown people will become the majority in the US. My point here, there is power in numbers, power and possibilities for all of us in Web3. Here are some other numbers. According to Pew Research, 22% of men say they've used cryptocurrency, while only 10% of women say they have. Even though people of color are investing in cryptocurrency at higher rates than they invest in mutual funds and individual stocks, which is interesting, question of trust there and perhaps past experience guiding our decisions, we are still outpaced by others. 62% of crypto investors are white, 67% are men, and 66% are under age 45. Just 19% of crypto investors are white women, and just 4% are Black women. Remember that the crypto industry is a $1.3 trillion industry that women and people of color currently are missing out on. However, the research does also show that 23% of African Americans own crypto, 17% of Latinos do, and 11% of white Americans do. So there's progress and there's possibility. Let's put this all together. Why does diversity in Web3 matter? It matters because of how much it has already affected our lives and how much more it's going to. As an indication, from 2000 to 2022, internet usage increased by 1,355%. I'm going to repeat that. From 2000 to 2022, internet usage increased by 1,355%. As we move into Web3 with more and more technologies and opportunities, we are going to be spending much more time in our digital worlds. So this is just going up. Let's take a look at what this means. So Web 2 and Web 3 are drastically white male-dominated spaces. Recently, a study into online participation, particularly in emerging technologies, was done and found that a barrier to participation by others was due to jargon and the terminology that's used, making it inaccessible, the language being exclusionary, either by design or just due to it being specialized and clicky. DAOs, hodling, moon. Some of this language makes noobs feel like they don't belong, and others often don't do a lot to welcome them. In fact, the internet can be a very unwelcome place for women, people of color, and in particular, women of color. Experienced participants can be merciless behind computer screens, where research shows it's much more tempting and easier to criticize and ridicule another person. This is known as the online inhibition effect. Being online lowers your inhibitions and often results in people behaving meaner or opening up about their personal lives more than they otherwise would. And while both men and women experience online harassment, the nature of it is different and more insidious against women. Multiple studies of online content find that there is more hate directed toward women than men online, with one finding that on average, women receive 100 sexually explicit or threatening messages a day, while men just get 3.5 of those daily, with a disproportionate effect on women of color. A study of Twitter found that over 25% of cyber aggression was toward women of color, compared to 3% towards white women. This can have a disproportionate chilling effect on our participation in discussions around Web 3 and our desire to operate in it. Literature on hate speech shows that it hurts more than other forms of harassment because it attacks a person's core identity or differences. Group-based hate speech produces more of an emotional response than other types of harassment because it triggers awareness of belonging to a more vulnerable group and triggers recollection of trauma, either experienced firsthand or witnessed or felt as generational trauma, which has been proven to cause damaging stress in the lives of Black Americans in particular. The harassment and hate speech that is so rampant online conveys the message that some people do not belong. Already, that has been witnessed in painful and traumatic ways. Earlier this year, a researcher who was looking to study Meta's social networking platform, Horizon World, which had around 300,000 users at the time, put on her avatar, and within 60 seconds of showing up, she was gang raped in the digital world, resulting in real-life distress and distrust. When it happened, at the time that it happened, there were at least 4 other users who had reported similar sexual harassment or assault there as well. There is an alarming number of examples of AI gone wrong when it comes to race and gender. There are countless examples where the outcome might have been different if there were more diverse teams at work. A paper published last year by the AI Now Institute of NYU notes that only 18% of authors at leading AI conferences are women, and more than 80% of AI professors are men, with similar disparities in AI researchers at leading tech companies. The authors call for urgent reevaluation of AI, pointing to tools that claim to detect sexuality from headshots, predict criminality based on facial features, or assess worker competence via micro-expressions. As they observe, issues of discrimination in the workforce and system building are deeply intertwined. This was demonstrated in 2020 with the departure from Google of Timnit Gebru, a renowned AI Black woman researcher, relating to Google's handling of a review of a research paper she had co-authored that highlighted issues with large language models. The events caused outrage over Google's handling of the matter and raised concerns about the chilling impact of discrimination on the ability of people to voice concerns about developing technology. The proliferation of webcams and AI errors in race-based facial recognition pose significant risks of darker-skinned individuals facing false accusations or worse. In 2020, a Black man in Michigan experienced this firsthand when a faulty facial recognition match led to an arrest for a crime he did not commit. This resulted in Amazon, Microsoft, and IBM pausing their facial recognition offerings for law enforcement, although the gestures were largely symbolic since they aren't major players in the industry. The software in question had previously been part of a federal study which showed that the software they used were imbued with bias, falsely identifying Black American and Asian faces 10 to 100 times more than Caucasian faces. The erroneous matching is in part due to a lack of diversity in the images used to develop the underlying databases. We've seen these impacts in other areas of law enforcement as well in tools used to aid judges in setting bail and making sentencing decisions. One study showed that using risk assessment tools which were intended to make bail setting more fair resulted in an increase in racial disparities in different jurisdictions using it, and more white defendants receiving no bail release much more often than Black defendants. What might be really scary here is that we can't be confident that we're even aware of the scope of the harm caused by this technology. There is no standard auditing or compliance procedure to test them before they go out. Since there is such a lack of diversity in tech right now, there's no way to know who will think to question them. When production deadlines loom and businesses are racing to be first to the market, there may be no incentive to ask the hard questions, and no one in the room to do it. Because we don't know what we don't know, what we do know should be enough to pause development or use of these risk assessment tools until we have clearly articulated standards about how to test them for bias. With our history of racial disparity, the stakes are simply too high. So how can we get it right? What do you do when you bring diversity into the mix? To start a better business, an abundance of benefits. There's a clear and established connection between diversity and profits. Reports by McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, Boston Consulting Group, and others show positive